the Audubon Center for Birds of Prey Education Manager.
Hi, thanks for joining us today. My name is Daniel.
Welcome to today's Lunch and Learn.
Thought we'd talk to you guys about reptiles, and who better to help us out than
And
our
our
pets.
So this is my pet tortoise, Gimlet, and Gimlet is a red-foot tortoise. Now they are found naturally in South America where they like forested areas. They are technically omnivores, although they mostly eat fruits and vegetables and leaves. They will eat some carrion in the wild if they found it though. Now he is full grown, he's about 12 years old, and I do know that he is a male because of the shape of his tail. The females have short little stubby tails and he has a very long tail.
So this is Ngozi. She was given the Zulu name for danger because she is a savanna monitor, and savanna monitors are going to be native in Central Africa from the western coast all the way over to the eastern coast. These guys are adapted for burrowing and digging. Their primary food is going to be insects, whether that be crickets, grasshoppers, worms. They'll even go after freshwater crustaceans like freshwater crabs, crawfish, even snails is part of their big diet. So as opposed to other monitor lizards where they'll have a sharp and slightly serrated teeth, she has more dull teeth built for crushing the exoskeletons of her food.
Daniel and I both have reptiles for pets. And when we got thinking about it, we realized they have scales and they lay eggs a little bit like birds. We're very curious to learn more, so we invited Chris Farrell, an Audubon scientist, to tell us more about reptiles and birds.
Hi, I'm Chris Farrell, the Northeast Florida Policy Associate for Audubon, Florida. I started working for Audubon back in 2001 on our Everglades restoration campaign. I had just completed my master's degree studying the herpetofauna of the Kissimmee River in the northern Everglades. Herpetofauna is a fancy science word that means reptiles and amphibians. So it was only natural that I started working for Audubon, an organization known for their work on reptiles. Well, not all reptiles. As you can see from Audubon's mission statement, we've really focused our work on dinosaurs, protecting dinosaurs and the places they need to survive.
Wait a minute. I thought Audubon deals with birds.
Well, yes, we work on birds. Birds are the only dinosaurs that survived extinction 66 million years ago. So, birds are dinosaurs, and that means they fall within the group of species we call reptiles. It could be confusing because birds are very different looking than most of their reptile relatives. But leaving them out of reptiles is like talking about your family and leaving out your brother and your sister, which is something you might want to do, but doesn't make it right.
Hi there, Chris. My question for you is, what exactly is a reptile?
Scientists have divided reptiles into many different groups based on similar characteristics. So we have the crocodiles, of which there are around 25 species. And this includes alligators and gharials and gavials and anything that looks kind of like a crocodile. There are the living dinosaurs, as we mentioned, our friends the birds. There's about 11,000 species of birds in the world. There's one group that's represented by only a single species. It's the tuatara. It lives in New Zealand. It looks kind of like a lizard, but it has a few different features, has some interesting teeth, and it has a third eye that makes it quite unique. We have turtles, around 356 species worldwide, noticed by their conspicuous shell. And then we have the group of really scaly reptiles that includes the lizards at around 6,500 species, snakes, around 3,700 species, and some interesting creatures called worm lizards or amphisbaenians, of which there are around 195 species in the world. Florida's got a lot of nice warm habitats that reptiles like, and we're lucky to have a pretty good diversity of reptiles living in our state. We have one alligator and one crocodile, so a total of 2 crocodilians. We have over 520 species of birds, dinosaurs. We have almost 30 native turtle species and a few exotics. About 17 native lizard species. We have many exotic lizards from other parts of the world that have come to Florida to make their home. We have 50 species of snakes, of which only 6 are venomous. We have 1 amphisbaenian, the Florida worm lizard.
Wow, Chris, that's so interesting. When I think about birds and reptiles, they both lay eggs. What are some other major similarities or differences between birds and reptiles?
One really big difference between most reptiles and the birds is the way they regulate their body temperature. Most reptiles are ectothermic. This is a fancy science word that means they regulate their body temperature using outside heat, ectothermic. What's important to reptiles is that there is ambient thermal heterogeneity. Goodness, what does that mean? It's just a fancy way of saying it's important there's a lot of different temperatures in the world around them. So there can be really hot rocks sitting out in the sun, some cool dirt underneath the shade of a tree, and some cold water in a spring-fed lake. Reptiles can use that to their advantage. When they want to get warm, they'll move out into the sun and sit on a rock. Or they can cool down in the shade, or if they want, they can really cool down and get in the water. They do this as needed based on what they're doing at the time. If they want to eat, they want to be active, they want to go hunt and find some food, or if they need to digest it, they need to be warm. So they'll go out in the sun and they'll warm up and they'll elevate their body temperature, and that'll allow them to be active and fast and catch prey. Then if they're done eating, they might go somewhere cooler and sit still and relax and use less energy. If it's going to be a long, cold night or maybe even a cold winter, then they'll enter a behavior we call brumation, where they get really cool and they sit really still. And this means they use very little energy and they can survive a long time without eating. Some snakes can go months without having a meal while they're brumating. Birds, on the other hand, are like you and me. They're endothermic. They rely on inside heat. And that means, again, like me, they eat constantly. They have to be breaking down food and releasing energy to have that heat in their body to keep their temperature up. They can also do a few things like hold their feathers certain ways or shiver, like us, to maintain their body heat.
What about their location on the food chain? Who eats who?
Okay, so first, what is a food chain? Food chain is just a way of describing how nutrients and energy move through living organisms. Basically, who's eating what, and in turn, who's being eaten. So, when you study this in nature, you quickly find out that it's complex, and food chains become food webs, and food webs change shape over time depending on what season it is, or if there have been recent events like fires or floods. And you can also find that an organism's place within a food web will change depending on the age of that organism. For example, which one eats the other if you have an alligator and a great blue heron? Trick question. It can go either way. It's easy to understand that an alligator might be able to eat a great blue heron. But turns out, if you have a really hungry heron who comes across some baby alligators, then we have to flip the food chain around. So reptiles don't occupy any one specific position within food webs. They can be anywhere near the bottom all the way up to the top. There are plenty of times I've seen birds like red-shouldered hawks flying off with black racers in their talons. There's also rat snakes that crawl through bushes and eat songbirds. And even big snakes like pythons and the mighty anaconda that can eat just about anything they want to eat. When they're eggs or when they're babies, they can be at the bottom of the food chain.
Chris, this is just fascinating. I've got another question for you. What about some Florida reptiles? Do you have a favorite Florida reptile, and why do you like it?
My favorite reptiles are the snakes, and in particular rat snakes. We have 3 rat snakes in Florida named after their dominant colors: a yellow rat, a red rat, and a gray rat. Just the other day, I had to pick up a yellow rat snake from the road in front of my car. And, I picked him up and he started squirming a little bit, but he didn't try to strike me or bite me. And I put him down safely on the side of the road so he could crawl away. Uh, Most snakes are relatively calm if you see them. And an important thing to remember is if you do see them, you're safe. So you shouldn't be scared by it. Once you see a snake, you can keep your distance. And snakes will not come after people. None of our snakes in North America are that aggressive where they go after people and attack them. If you see it, you can keep your distance. Most snakes are relatively slow. You can walk backwards faster than they can crawl. And they don't really want to get near you. They're afraid of you. They think you're a predator. So they'll usually just slither on their way. People aren't afraid of fuzzy things like squirrels, but could you imagine picking up a squirrel? Man, not enough Band-Aids in the world for that. One bird that I really like is a raptor that you won't find at Audubon Center for Birds of Prey. It's called the secretary bird. And just like me, it likes reptiles. But it likes reptiles for breakfast and for lunch and for dinner. It's a very tall bird, over 4 feet tall, and it hunts entirely from the ground. So it walks around and it finds prey and it smashes down on them with its talons. And it will eat snakes, it'll eat lizards, it'll eat hedgehogs, it'll eat scorpions, it'll eat other birds. It'll even eat puff adders and cobras, which are venomous snakes. It lives in Africa, so you won't see one around Florida. But you can check them out online or go to the zoo. See if your local zoo has a secretary bird to take a look at.
That's awesome, Chris. Anything else to tell us?
One last fun reptile fact. In Florida, we have a really interesting snake called the Brahminy blind snake. Now, it's an invasive exotic species, which is unfortunate, but it's still a really cool snake. The adults, full grown, are usually less than 6 inches long. They burrow underground, so you never really see them crawling around in the grass or anything. They have tiny little eyes covered by translucent scales. They can detect light, but they can't really see images. And if that weren't enough to make them unique, here's the kicker. This is a parthenogenetic species, meaning only girls, no boys. Every single one of these snakes is female, so pretty cool. They come out often after it rains. They're usually found in central and southern Florida. So if you live down there, after it rains, if you see a bunch of earthworms, go check them out to make sure they're all actually worms. If you see some that have a bluish tint to them, don't have the regular segments like earthworms. If you look at them closely, they have scales. And if you look at them really closely, sometimes you can see their little tongue darting out of their head. Although it is hard to tell their head from their tail. They look very similar. But that's the Brahminy blind snake, a very unique critter we have here in Florida.
Thank you so much, Chris, for answering our questions. It brings to mind that choosing a pet wisely is very important. Doing your research on whether you get a cat or a dog or a tortoise or a lizard is all very important to make sure that you know how to best care for that pet and how long you will have them. Gimlet will be with me for the rest of my life. They live to be about 60 years old. So that was an important factor in taking him as a pet. So do your research and choose your pets wisely.
Thank you for joining us for today's Lunch and Learn. We hope you guys had fun.
Since today was Take Your Reptile to Work Day, we popped over to the Raptor Trauma Clinic and got x-rays of our animals. Let's take a look at what they look like.
On.
guys are good people and I really want to get. I'm gonna bite you in the eye.